Hey guys, this is On Track GP, I'm Jamie Chambers. Former Formula One boss Bernie Ecclestone is convinced that Max Verstappen has already established himself as the greatest driver in the history of the series. With that in mind, we're going to take a look at some of the drivers that could be considered the GOAT of Formula One. Statistically, Lewis Hamilton sits atop the Formula One mountain with most race wins, podiums and pole positions among his many records, while he and Michael Schumacher are the only 7-time world champions. Though these days, it is Max Verstappen schooling the field. After defeating Hamilton in the Abu Dhabi 21 World Championship decider, Verstappen went on to comfortably retain his title, while his level of dominance in 2023 has rewritten the record books. Verstappen embarked on a record-breaking 10-race winning streak between the 23 Miami and Italian Grand Prix, while Red Bull overall were on a run of 15 in a row, both streaks snapped by Carlos Sainz in Singapore. Verstappen then returned to form in Japan, confirming that Singapore was just a blip for the driver who Ecclestone recognises as the best ever in Formula One. However, F1 legend Sir Jackie Stewart believes it is too early to call Max Verstappen an all-time Formula One great, as he is still at the peak of his powers. Of course, circumstances are different in different eras, and the number of races are the highest they have ever been. But given the speed and consistency he has shown, it has led some to putting the Red Bull driver among the all-time greats already. But despite his record-breaking run of success in recent years, 3-time world champion Stewart believes that a true test of an all-time status within Formula One will come later on in his career. Red Bull's Chief Technology Officer Adrian Newey has worked with some of the greatest drivers in Formula One history over his decades in the sport. And he said in a recent interview with Autosport that Verstappen is already firmly in that category. Max is clearly one of the all-time greats and he's at the top of his game, Newey said. Former F1 team principal Eddie Jordan went one step further than that, telling his Formula for Success podcast back in May that Verstappen could even become the best ever. He has such a phenomenal attitude in the car, he is aggressive when he needs to be aggressive, he is tough when he needs to be tough, but he's clever as well. He knows how to look after the car. But while Jordan and others say the GOAT debate is between Schumacher, Hamilton and Verstappen, one cannot discount the talent that was Ayrton Senna. The Brazilian won 3 world titles before his untimely death at the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. For all the wonderful memories that Senna gave F1, the words accompanying his career will be, what if? The Brazilian was arguably the most naturally talented driver in F1 history and one that the world has best seen. He seemed to have an innate understanding of where the grip was, and that was evident in early races when he was overperforming with slower cars. His rivalry with Prost, as mentioned, defined F1 in the late 80s and early 90s, and Senna successfully won 3 titles with McLaren. His early death driving for the much fancied Williams team was a huge shock to the sport, and his life was immortalised in the Senna documentary released in 2010. Senna's charisma, outspokenness and sheer talent still make a fan's favourite to this day. With Lewis Hamilton being the modern datum for which a Formula One driver's success is measured, it is worth noting that he is the man who tops the majority of the podium record charts and has been on the F1 stage since 2007. Within 2 years of driving in the sport, he was a world champion and was arguably the most exciting newcomer to the sport since Senna. Hamilton had to bide his time before winning another title and earned it in 2014 following a switch to Mercedes, the start of a wonderful partnership where he would take 6 more crowns with the Silver Arrows. Now let's take a look at other drivers that should be considered the GOAT of Formula One. Mika Häkkinen. Per head, no country in the world has produced more Formula One champions than Finland, with Häkkinen taking 2 of the 4 won by Finland. He was dominant in the McLaren during the late 90s, taking the 1998 and 1999 crowns. Häkkinen took on the nickname the Flying Finn, and he had a unique driving style which suited him to slippery conditions. This stemming from Finland's unique method of teaching people to drive. Michael Schumacher even admitted that Häkkinen was his toughest opponent when the Finn quit the sport in 2001. Sebastian Vettel. Vettel perhaps doesn't get the credit he deserves due to the fact that his F1 career ended in relative mediocrity at the end of 2022. However, for 4 years at Red Bull, he was virtually untouchable, particularly in 2011 and 2013 when he won the title with several races to spare. The German, a former protege of Schumacher, was an excellent frontrunner and often dominated races in which he started on pole. A move to Ferrari did not yield any further success, but the German is certainly a great of the sport. Fernando Alonso. It was always going to take a special driver to knock Michael Schumacher off his perch following 5 straight titles with Ferrari. And Alonso proved exactly that in his Renault in 2005 and 2006. The Spaniard was a driving prodigy and showed plenty of ability, driving for the notoriously slow Minardi in 2001. He moved to Renault in 2003, and 2 years later, the French manufacturer was standing on the top step of the podium. A mixture of recklessness and bad career decisions, notably joining McLaren in 2007 to race alongside rookie Lewis Hamilton, meant that he never achieved another world title. However, he had a few close shaves with Ferrari, finishing second in both 2010 and 2012, just 3 points behind Vettel in the latter. Sir Jackie Stewart. Scotsman Stewart won 3 World Championship titles in the 1970s and did that whilst driving for 2 different teams. He won the 1969 championship with Matra before switching to Tyrrell, where he enjoyed great success in 1971 and 73. The Flying Scot was a superbly talented operator and managed to win a total of 27 races in 99 starts. His greatest contribution has been to driver safety, however. Stewart was committed to making the sport safer and was instrumental in the addition of barriers and medical crews to be present at tracks, as well as seatbelts and full frontal crash helmets. Niki Lauda. Lauda's rivalry with flamboyant Brit James Hunt is probably the most significant element of the Austrian's career. So much so that it hit the big screen in 2013 following the release of Rush. While the focus of that film was more on Hunt, it was Lauda who was the most successful of the two, winning 3 titles in the space of 9 years. It is Lauda's bravery that makes him a standout following the 1976 crash at the Nürburgring, which nearly cost him his life. The Austrian suffered severe burns as well as losing most of his right ear, but he fought his way back to fitness and took the 1977 championship with Ferrari. 7 years later, after retiring from action once more, he won another title with McLaren. Alain Prost. Frenchman Prost was the ultimate smooth racer, as well as being a studious character. He earned the nickname The Professor during his career. Prost is one of only 5 men to have won at least 4 F1 world titles, and he managed to do so under the backdrop of the sport's most famous ever rivalry between himself and Ayrton Senna. The two had their most controversial moments, in particular at the Japanese Grand Prix in 1989 and 1990, when the duo each secured a title following collisions. Prost was a master behind the wheel and ended his career on a high in 1993. He returned after a year-long sabbatical to join Williams and breezed to a 4th title. Juan Manuel Fangio. Fangio dominated the sport during the 1950s and was the sport's original poster boy. He was largely untouchable during his time in the sport and notably won titles driving for 4 different manufacturers: Alfa Romeo, Maserati, Ferrari and Mercedes. Fangio was often the oldest driver when racing and didn't claim his first title until he turned 40 in 1951, proving that he could match the youngest upstarts in the sport. Michael Schumacher. One of 2 7-time world championships and one of the best drivers the sport has ever seen, Michael Schumacher is simply legendary. His first 2 titles came in the mid-90s driving for Benetton, and the German proved to be a fiery competitor as well as a master of wet weather. That increased tenfold when he won 5 titles in a row between 2000 and 2004 driving for Ferrari. Records were tumbling left, right and centre during those days. Schumacher knew how to produce moments when they mattered the most, and his strict fitness regime saw him become a pioneer for the sport, taking F1 drivers to a new level of athleticism. The saddest part of Schumacher's story came post-retirement. He suffered a traumatic brain injury after falling in a skiing accident in 2013, and he is still recovering to this day, with few details disclosed about his condition. It should also be said that Formula One has changed tremendously since the 50s, so with that in mind, here are our contenders based on decade also. The 50s. Juan Manuel Fangio, the statistical GOAT for 5 decades. The 60s. Jack Brabham, Graham Hill and Jim Clark. The 70s. Jackie Stewart, Niki Lauda and Emerson Fittipaldi. The 80s. Nelson Piquet and Alain Prost. The 90s. Michael Schumacher, Mika Häkkinen and Ayrton Senna. The noughties. Michael Schumacher, Fernando Alonso and Kimi Räikkönen. The teens. Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton. Verstappen, Hamilton, Schumacher, Vettel, Alonso, Häkkinen, Fangio, Prost, Lauda and Stewart. Some of the biggest names to ever race, win and dominate in Formula One. On Track GP, we'll be discussing who we think the GOAT is in an upcoming podcast episode, and we want to hear from you. Who do you think is the Formula One GOAT? Have we missed a driver who should be considered? What is your criteria for Formula One's greatest of all time? We want to hear your thoughts, so let us know in the comments below. Thanks for joining us, and remember to like, comment, share and subscribe. This has been On Track GP. I've been Jamie Chambers. Keep the pedal to the metal, and I'll catch you in the next video. I threw myself. Who am I, sorry? Who am I? Yeah, right. Formula. There we go, right. I read this 6 times yesterday. Right, breathe, let's do this again.
You got this.
Championship. Oh, come on. I can say that word, honest. Sorry.
That's a shame. I have a half an hour to do this one.
No stress.
Saying that Formula One, further than that, telling his Jamie bloopers for like
8 minutes in a row.
Formula. Would you believe me if I said that this is the one I actually learnt the most? The Brazilian was arguably the most naturally talented driver in F1 ever. Oh my goodness. Brain injury after failing. That's a bit rude.